Alrighty, folks. Here at the Melanin Initiative, we simplify medical information into language you can understand. We create a safe space to ask your questions and share our nursing perspective. So, welcome to our favorite guest, one of our favorite, I won't say favorite, maybe she's my favorite guest, but one of our favorite guests, our licensed therapist and private practice owner, Kelsey Wilson, a
Hi.
compassionate and culturally responsive voice in mental wellness. With years of experience in community mental health and trauma informed care, Kelsey specializes in helping women release patterns of overfunctioning, guilt, and emotional suppression rooted in childhood survival roles. Whether it's naming the pain of being the responsible one or teaching women how to reconnect with joy, Kelsey's approach is equal parts radical honesty and emotional healing. If you're new here, welcome to the Melanin Initiative. I'm Alicia, and I co host the Melanin Initiative alongside Kimberly and Geraldine, who sends her love. We're a health literacy podcast. When we say health literacy, we're talking about your ability to obtain information, to understand that information, and to use that information to manage your health and advocate for others. Our mission here is twofold. One, to simplify complex health information, and two, to elevate the expertise of nurses, spotlight the diverse career opportunities within the healthcare industry, and to inform our peers how to leverage their expertise as clinicians and entrepreneurs. If you haven't already, subscribe so you can be notified when we release new episodes. Thumbs up the video, leave a comment, and share the show with your friends. This shows the algorithm that this show is important. So when people like you are looking for information like this, we'll show up higher in the search results. And as a reminder, this show is for educational purposes only. The opinions expressed are our opinions alone. They are not a representation of any of our affiliations. If you are experiencing a medical emergency, you should seek medical attention and medical guidance from your healthcare provider. If you're having a physical emergency, you can call 911. If you're having a mental health emergency, you can call 988 or text 741 741.
A returned guest and award winner is our guest today, someone who brings both clinical expertise and deep empathy to the conversation around trauma and healing. Kelsey Wilson, a licensed clinical social worker and founder of Gila Psychotherapy, a thriving private practice based in Virginia, and she sees patients out of DC with more than 6 years of experience in community mental health and 2 years in private practice. Kelsey brings a compassionate, culturally competent lens to her work with individuals and families, especially women navigating trauma, forgiveness, and generational trauma, all topics we've talked about here in the episode on the Mental Initiative. Kelsey specializes in helping people understand the origins of their emotional pain, to identify the ways trauma shows up in everyday life, and take actionable steps towards healing. Her work is grounded in empathy, education, and empowerment, values that align perfectly with the Mellon Initiative. In this episode, she brings her expertise to shed light on parentification trauma, especially in the lives of Black and Brown families, and offers language, tools, and hope for those who were once the responsible one long before they were ready. It's my honor to welcome you back, Kelsey, to the Mellon Initiative podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so before we jump into our case study, let's do our icebreaker. This is the fun part of the show. It's supposed to be easy, don't overthink it. And this gives our audience a chance to get to know a different side of you than your clinical practice. So, what's the most important thing you've learned about starting a business?
Yeah, so one thing I've learned about starting a business is it's so important to bring in elements of yourself that you really enjoy and you want to be able to help people with. So for me, I'm a military brat, so I really love serving military individuals, whether that be veterans or women who are affiliated with the military. So I work with a lot of military wives or children of military service members, sometimes even grandchildren. And there's a lot of trauma threads or themes that we work on in therapy that sometimes are at the top of their mind or sometimes like buried underneath, that we need to uncover. So that's something that I really try to bring into my practice. And of course, I specialize in working with women. That's an area that I'm really passionate about. So try to bring in some of those things that are in my identity and be able to help people.
A tool you use every day for organization?
A tool that I use every day for organization. Well, of course, I use my EHR, my electronic health record system, to keep me up to date with my calendar and things like that. I love using my Google Calendar too to help me with my appointment reminders. I have an iPhone, so that gives me my alerts and things like that to keep me going. Um, and yeah, just trying to stay on a structured schedule. Um, Usually work day hours and try to make sure I'm getting my rest and things like that. But those are just my self care things.
Okay, one thing you can't live without?
One thing that I can't live without, mm, I would say my family and like my community and my self care time. Those are the things that help me keep my practice going, because I have to pour into myself so I can pour into other people.
Hmm, hold that thought. Your favorite resource for new therapists starting out?
I would say YouTube. For those who are trying to start a
We
business,
love it.
really, yeah, really using YouTube to help you learn how to build a business is so important. That's the way that I learned most of the tools that I needed to start my private practice. I was on YouTube looking at videos, trying to learn all the ins and outs. And then that really helped me find some online mentors that could teach me things. Of course, I did consultation as well with professionals who were already in the industry, but YouTube was a really big part of it.
Okay, so as an entrepreneur and high achiever, what's one way people can support you that you don't currently receive?
What's one way that people can support me, whether that be family or people in the community?
Yep,
Anyone?
whoever's in your support circle.
Yeah, I would say just, of course, I have like family, friends, people reach out and kind of ask, but I would say I'm always open to building more connections and building more friends who are in the industry or outside of it, like working professionals who are doing the same thing. So, we don't know who we don't know. So, people who are open to becoming a part of my support network, that's something that I'm always looking to build and grow in.
How do you do that?
Yeah, so I always am going to networking events. I try to make sure that I'm going to one or two a month. That's one way. And then just having an open mindset every day when you wake up that you're open to new opportunities, meeting new people. That mindset shift is really important too.
Thank you for sharing. So let's get
Yeah.
into our case study with Luna. She's 38, Afro-Latino woman who came to therapy reporting chronic anxiety, migraines, and difficulty setting boundaries at work and in relationships. She was often described by others as the strong one or the responsible one, but inside she felt overwhelmed, resentful, and at times invisible. In therapy, Luna reflected on her childhood. She's the oldest of four. She began cooking meals and, oh my gosh, this is me. Okay, and managing the household at age 10. While her single mother worked multiple jobs, she was expected to emotionally support her mother, protect her younger siblings, and not cause problems. Luna internalized the belief that her needs were less important, and as an adult, she continued to prioritize others, often at the expense of her physical and mental health. She struggled with guilt when resting, saying, "If I'm not helping someone, I feel useless."
All right, so let's dive right in, Kelsey. Let's start with Luna's physical symptoms. She's reporting chronic migraines and anxiety. How often are these physical issues actually rooted in the emotional overload she experienced as a child, rather than just, normal adult stress?
Definitely. So this is actually a pretty common case that I would treat. I know Luna, she's a case study, but a lot of the women that I see experience these same issues. And I always encourage my clients to get a physical done every year, so that we can just make sure that there's no underlying reasons why she's experiencing the chronic headaches and the migraines. So if you're watching this, get your physical for the year. Make sure you're keeping up with your labs. But headaches and anxiety are often a product of trauma. Um, that our body is trying to give us a signal that something's wrong and we need to actually work on it. And so this is pretty common for a lot of women who go through trauma, specifically parentification trauma. Um, and I like to make sure that my clients know what it is because a lot of times they don't have a label to put on what happened to them when they were a kid. It was just an expectation. You're the oldest, and so you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z because that's just what you're supposed to do. But they're often not ready for a lot of those responsibilities that get put on them.
Mm. I would agree to that. So, speaking directly to Luna, what does it truly mean when you're always seen as the rock for everyone else, but secretly you feel like you're exhausted and unseen?
Yeah, so a lot of times, um, kids get this label, oh, you're an old soul. And when people say that to them, they view it as like either a badge of honor or it's like, what does that mean? Or maybe they think that that's a good thing. But then when they become older and they realize that a lot of their childhood, they didn't really get to fully experience it and other people did, um, there's a grieving process that comes with that. And so it can show up in how we process conflict in our relationships. It can result in feeling like you have to be an overachiever or you always have to get everything right. Um, and that can create a lot of chronic stress that builds up in your body and it can show up as health issues, migraines like what she's experiencing, or other things like anxiety, depression. um, you know Unfortunately, uh,
Yeah.
there's stress that comes with that. Hmm.
I want to talk a little bit more about the relationship piece.
Hmm.
So, how does the early role of being, the household manager or an emotional caretaker at the age of 10 shape the way Luna shows up in her adult relationships and at her job today?
Yeah, so a lot of times it can look like having to take the lead on the household responsibilities, take the lead at work. And if things don't always go as planned, sometimes people can experience anxiety attacks, or feel like a lot of tension in their body that they hold on to because things aren't going exactly as planned. But of course, we know with our day to day, life is unpredictable. And so it can be a little bit hard to manage if we've always been in that role of being responsible.
I also think about maybe like hyper independence, those,
Absolutely.
folks who feel that they need to do it all and they can do it all, and then not asking for help when they really need it. So I think it could probably show up in that way as well.
And not knowing how to ask for help. Sometimes, especially if you're an entrepreneur, and we say, "Hey, get an assistant." You say, "What do I tell them to do?" That's like the
Right.
first thing.
Delegation.
That's the first thing this person will say. What do I tell them to do? And I love that. I love talking to my peers because so much of what we do in our clinical practice parallels what we do in business. So there is a phase in your clinical training where you have to prove that you can do it independently.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
but that's a phase. There is
Yeah.
also a much longer phase where you need to prove that you can effectively delegate and evaluate that that task has been completed. It's the same in business.
Hmm. And in life,
Yes.
Mhm.
just life in general.
Yeah. So I want to just pause for our TMI family who's listening or watching. If you've ever been called the strong one or the responsible one, I want you to drop the words "the strong one" in the comments and let us see how many of us carry that title. Kelly, let's dig a little bit deeper into mindset. I love that you brought that up. Why do people like Luna feel intense guilt for simply resting or saying no, even when they are completely burned out?
Yeah, a lot of times it's these underlying messages that they got from their parents. Sometimes they were direct messages, and sometimes they're a little bit less direct and more like subtle. Like you know that you have a parent who is working long hours, for instance, and so you know that they can't physically do XYZ, such as the cooking or making sure that the house is cleaned up or making sure that your siblings get to activities and events and things like that. So that falls back on the oldest
Mhm.
sibling to get done. And so when you move out of the house or you become, independent on your own, some of those expectations don't just go away because you've been driven to make sure everything gets done for all of these years. So you're kind of conditioned to continue that same momentum. But that can lead to burnout. That can make your body tired.
It does.
Okay, that's so powerful. It makes me wonder, has being the responsible one become a culturally praised trauma response,
Mhm.
especially for women of color who are so often expected to carry disproportionate burdens?
Definitely, I would say so, because it's often mask. It's a mask that sometimes we have to carry, and when you drop the mask, it's like people like start to question sometimes, like what's going on with you, or like what happened. But it's like you've been wearing this mask for so long, trying to keep up with all of these responsibilities and all of these things that you thought you were supposed to do, and now. Um, people are noticing that you're not able to keep up with it because it's something that just isn't sustainable to always be on go mode. Everyone has to rest.
It's so interesting you mentioned that. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and she said that usually at work she presents as like the funny one, the happy one, the laid back one. And she had got news yesterday that kind of made her upset. And immediately everyone was texting her like, "Are you okay? What's wrong?"
Yeah.
Because she didn't have that face of strength on that she usually does. And like they don't ever really know what's going on in her life, but the one time that she put the mask down, it was all of a sudden the news of the day at work, right? So it's interesting that how what we show others, and then when we finally like let that down, what the perception can be.
Absolutely. And your friend is human. So some days
Exactly.
we're going to have days where we're on, and then other days where our feelings are really impacting us. And we can't always just put on that smile or wear that mask.
Curious because I hear you talking about parentification and having this heavy load of responsibility pretty young. In your practice, or even just your idea, when it comes to what happens to those women when they get older, the percentage that, because they've been doing that for so long, are eager to start their own family and have a big family that they can continue to care for, to continue to have do that, versus those who are like, yeah, I don't want any children because I've been doing all this for a long time and I don't want it, right? Especially people who have younger siblings and they kind of raise those younger siblings. I have seen they don't want to have their own children, right? And be pretty adamant about that. I'll let you talk because recently I went to the mall. I met two ladies in their 20s, and both of them, I didn't even ask them. They were just like, yeah, I don't want to have children. It was just like, okay. But I just thought it was so interesting that they were so confident about that and pretty. I mean, they're still young, obviously they can change their mind, but the fact that they even brought that up to a stranger in a very short a period of time, when I asked them just kind of about their career and aspirations, how they brought that up so quickly.
Absolutely. No, you bring up a really good point. I see women on both ends, right? Some women who are definitely, they want to have a family and they want to do things differently with their own family. And so they're in therapy to do the trauma work so that they can show up differently for their own family, the way that maybe they didn't feel like they got the support, or they want to replay the story and rewrite it in the way that they want it to be written. And then I also meet with women on the other side who, because of what they went through with their family, they don't want to have kids, and I make sure that both of those clients who are experiencing these situations feel empowered to make whatever decisions that they feel are best for them. um, you know and a lot of times, like, for women who want to be child free, they make that decision because they really feel like it is the right one for them. Sometimes there are trauma things that come out as we kind of talk about that decision, and we just navigate that. And the most important thing is that they're making the decision that's right for them. Because I think sometimes society encourages women to have children even if they don't want to, because that's like the societal norm. And so I always try to make sure that my clients know that their decision is their own and they can choose whatever they feel is best for them.
That's a whole episode by itself.
Oh yeah.
So I could ask the rest of my questions about that. But
So, if Luna's entire sense of self worth is tied to her productivity and usefulness to others, how do you even begin to help her untangle that? What's her first start?
Yeah. So it goes back to core beliefs, right? Like taking a look at what are the things that I believe about myself because that's what I actually believe about myself, or what are the things that I've internalized because of messages that have come from like my caregivers, people that have been in my life since I was younger, or that I was forced to believe just because I was forced to grow up so fast. And so in therapy, we really take a look at that. Where are some of these messages coming from? And what do I want to believe about myself here, present day?
alrighty. So I want to ask everyone listening, what is one thing you feel guilty for doing that is purely for you? It could be taking a nap, buying a coffee, anything. Let's normalize self care in the comments.
Okay, Kelsey, in your work with Luna, you use specific therapies like EMDR and parts work, which we've talked about we talked in depth about EMDR before, whole episode you can see in our mental health playlist, which we've linked below. And then in your last episode, where we talked about how trauma impacts communities of color, you introduced parts work to us. And so here you're using that again when it comes to Luna. And for those who might not have heard it, who didn't watch your episode yet, can you just briefly explain what they are and why they're so effective for parentification trauma?
Yes, definitely. So, parts work is a great intervention that therapists use for treating trauma, specifically parentification trauma. It's great. You're going back and looking at different parts of yourself that maybe have some unresolved wounds that need to be addressed. And so, for clients who have gone through trauma when they were growing up, whether that be their parent was absent or they had to work a lot, so they had to grow up faster, take care of their younger siblings, making sure they get bathed and fed and get to all their activities. And as a result of that, they didn't fully get their full childhood experience. Parts work is really helpful because we can go back to those memories, those core memories of when you felt that way, and be able to process that, and really allow that part of yourself to have a voice, and be able to get that out. And sometimes therapy is the only space that you have to do that. EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, is also really great because we're going back to those core targeted memories of when you felt anxious because you had to make decisions that you maybe didn't feel ready for as a kid, to be able to sustain the day to day because your parent wasn't available emotionally or physically to be able to make those decisions for you. So, those are two trauma treatments that I use often in my practice that really help clients process some of those unresolved wounds that they have that are impacting them today.
Hi, I'm Alicia from the Melanin Initiative podcast. Our mission is twofold. One, to simplify complex health information so you feel empowered to ask questions, educated on how to manage your health, and confident to navigate the healthcare system. And two, to elevate the expertise of nurses, spotlight the diverse career opportunities within the healthcare industry, and inform our peers how to leverage their expertise as clinicians and entrepreneurs. In less than 2 years, we've grown to over 50,000 views and 1,000 downloads, with an international audience spanning the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and more. Our engaged listeners are professionals, entrepreneurs aged 25 to 44 who value authentic, impactful content. Want to connect with this dynamic audience? Advertise with us. Send in your 1 minute video ad and let's amplify your brand. Email tmi.melanin@gmail.com for rates and details. Let's work together.
I just want to say that a little bit slower for our audience in case they didn't catch that. Eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy. Thank you.
Yes. Mhm.
Well, thank you both for breaking that down. And with parts work, in terms of Luna accessing the younger parts of herself that felt abandoned, what does that process actually look like? How do you help a 38-year-old woman connect with her 10-year-old self?
Yeah. Yeah. So part of it is looking at, okay, what is the emotion that's showing up today? So let's use the example of like sadness or anxiety. Okay, what was the first time that you felt that way? And then we would play back the tape of when the first time she felt that way. And 10-year-old self might pop up when we say that. Okay, is there a memory associated with that? Let's go back and let's take a look at what happened around that situation, really talking about the feelings and the events that were taking place. So maybe we go back to 10-year-old self and we're like, okay, I remember when I was 10, there was an event that I wanted to go to, but I know that my siblings had chores that they needed to complete. They had homework that needed to be done. Mom was working late, so I couldn't go do the thing that I really wanted to do. And that made me feel sad. And it made me feel anxious that I couldn't go and hang out with my friends. So we really explore what was going on during that time and really process the emotions around that and how that kind of translates into today, right? Feeling guilty for taking time for myself, feeling like I always have to show up for other people, even when I feel tired. So we identify those themes and kind of link them together.
I relate so much to this case study because my parents are married. They were married when I was a kid, but my dad was away a lot because he was serving the Marine Corps. And
Yeah.
so I saw my mom serve in both positions as a married woman, but also as a single mom. right? And so I had a younger brother, and she worked late sometimes. Sometimes she wouldn't get home till midnight, and I would stay up and watch Arsenio Hall with her. And so I did have the responsibility of speaking for my brother, looking after him, doing chores, starting cleaning before I was even 10 years old, cooking full meals for a family, doing the grocery shopping, right? And so I completely relate to this. But I'm curious, Alicia, as you're listening to this, do you have any of that being the only child in the family?
Um, I for certainly think I was spoiled, but maybe differently. Not from like a sibling perspective. Um, what specifically are you asking
I was
me?
just curious if you relate to the case study at all.
Um, part of it. I think when you're an only child, all of the responsibilities are always on you. So like you're always having to feel like the strong one, the response. You wear all hats. So I think I can relate to it just because there was no one else for them to I want to say them, I mean my parents, to uh, put their hopes, wants, dreams on, except for me. So I feel like I had to live up to a certain standard, in that capacity.
And I think for some, I know we're talking about Luna, she's female, and you specialize in taking care of women. But I think this is also very relatable for women who have sons and the
Yeah.
father's not in the home and they make him the man of the house,
Oh, yeah.
right? Is that a fair analogy?
Yeah, yeah, it definitely shows up in family dynamics that way. For women who just, they have a son, who maybe she has other children too. It's like, okay, you're the man of the house, right? So you have to make sure that, trash is getting taken out, or you're making, sometimes adult decisions before they're ready to do so. Um, and then later in life, sometimes that can have implications, right? For the child. Um, whether that be stress or whether that feeling like a sense of responsibility over things that they're not responsible for. Sometimes it can show up in their interpersonal relationships, romantic relationships too, when they have more responsibility on them at a younger age. So all things that I help my clients try to navigate.
How does it show up in their relationship?
Yeah. So sometimes when you're given responsibility earlier than you were ready for. It can show up in terms of like when you're trying to make decisions with your partner. The communication can be a little bit challenging because you've always felt like you had to make all the decisions. So maybe when your partner is trying to give their opinion, it might show up because conflict resolution skills weren't necessarily fully modeled because you were always having to figure it out on your own. So it can show up like that. It can also show up at work, where people are asking you to do things and you feel like you always have to say yes. That can also show up in romantic relationships too, where you always feel like you have to be a pleaser. So those are two examples.
Okay, thank you for answering those for me. Okay, so after doing this profound internal work, what is a small practical step Luna can take in her daily life to start honoring her own needs without feeling overwhelmed by guilt?
Yeah, I would say starting to practice setting healthy boundaries is so important. Being able to say no and stand firm in that, if that is your truth, is so important. Um, and sometimes that can come with feeling guilt because if you were always responsible, sometimes there wasn't an option to say no. You always had to say yes because you didn't have any other choices. So starting to practice setting boundaries is huge. Therapy can help you to do that. But even before you start therapy, if you want to just start evaluating, like, okay, what are some areas where I feel like I want to say no, but I feel like I have to say yes? And just starting to practice saying no. That would be, I would say, a huge step.
I think as women, I think that's a struggle,
Yeah.
Yes.
right? If you want to be the nice one, the kind one, dependable, all that list, it comes with being the person who says yes, right?
Yeah.
Whoever wants to be around, the friendly, outgoing, all those things, right? Curious, Alicia, because Kelsey said if you're used to being the one who's making all the decisions, if you're an only child, there is no conflict resolution, right?
Right.
So I would think you would experience that same thing.
Yeah, I think interestingly, it shows up in friendships or relationships for me because I have to think about things differently because I never really had to interact that way when I was younger. As far as in my house, in my home, my parents made the decisions, and I just kind of went with what they told me to do. So I think that kind of shows up in my relationships and now.
Thank you for sharing. So let's all make a collective commitment. I want everyone watching or listening to type, I deserve rest in the comments. Let's speak that truth into existence for ourselves and hold space for each other to do the same.
All right, and Kelsey, one last, kind of question for the topic here. As Luna begins to heal and embody this new way of being, what kind of ripple effect can that have on her family and community? And how does one person's healing journey give others permission to heal as well?
Absolutely. So, I know in a previous episode we talked about intergenerational trauma. Generational healing is so important, right? And so, when one person in a family system decides to heal, sometimes that spreads, and other people in the family start to notice the changes that are happening inside of you. It can also positively impact your community, how you show up in your workspace, or how you show up in your friend circle, other communities you're connected to, and it has a ripple effect that way. So, I always encourage people to think about it from that perspective too. Like it's a wave. Like once you start your healing process, it's going to have a positive impact on so many different areas of your life.
Yes, Kelsey, this has been another incredibly powerful conversation for our listeners and us, and to be quite clear, to allow us to feel seen in Luna's story. Where can we all start to learn more? Any books, websites, or resources you'd like to recommend as a first start after we've made our appointment with our therapist?
Yeah, so I would say doing some work just online, looking at some different articles about internal family systems, parts work that we talked about today would be really helpful. So you can start to explore different parts of yourself. Would be amazing. I always like to encourage people to look at EMDRIA, which is a website that talks more about EMDR, so that you're familiar with it and learn about the different phases that you go through as you do trauma treatment with EMDR therapy. Those are two recommendations that I would have for people who are wanting to learn more.
Can you spell that? MG?
EMDRIA.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing that. So,
awesome.
what are three TMI takeaways you want to leave with every person listening today about healing from this specific kind of trauma?
Yeah, I would say healing from parentification trauma is possible. It's a process, and it involves doing the work to really understand yourself and understand some of those traumas that have happened in the past, and feel validated that maybe there were some things that happened to you that were before you were ready. Like so, that's totally okay to go to therapy to work on that. Um, you don't have to be the strong one. I think that's an important message. Just knowing that it's okay for you to rest. Um, and sometimes we have to rewrite certain core beliefs that we have about ourselves, and therapy can really help us do that work. So don't be afraid to unlearn some of the things that are barriers for you that are keeping you from getting to the next stage of your healing.
Before we sign off, we gave a lot of tips on how she can unpack begin her healing, but how can someone avoid it?
How can someone avoid parentification trauma or which
Their
aspect?
children, yeah, making that, inflicting that upon their children.
Yeah. So I would say really evaluate, like for parents,
Yeah.
I would say really just being mindful of how much we're placing on kids. So a lot of parents like to do a lot of reading about like developmentally, like what's appropriate, like what are appropriate tasks for my kid to be doing at what specific age. And I also want to acknowledge a lot of times there are things outside of parents' control. And I totally see that within the cases that I treat, right, where parents, because of economic reasons or another parent's work schedule, that's the reason why some of these things kind of come into play. So I totally want to acknowledge those pieces. But I would just say being as mindful as possible, having conversations with your kid, just asking, how are you feeling about the amount of work that you have right now? How was school? How was your day? And then sometimes if kids know that you're asking those questions on an ongoing basis, they feel more comfortable to be able to tell you, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling anxious. And then we can make changes to try to provide more support. So those are just like some small things that can be done.
Because I would think, especially in nursing, I have said before, 98% of nurses work through school, and a lot of nurses are the breadwinner. So you're working full time, you're in school full time, you have a kid or two, maybe you're a single parent. I don't imagine they have time to read, right? And maybe they live somewhere where they don't have a lot of family support. And so I would think it's very challenging to avoid that because you need you're depending on them,
Mhm.
and so yeah, certainly having a therapist and these resources and community. And maybe, we have to be honest, you might not be able to have it all right now. Might be able to work, go through school, all and have all those support systems in place right now, but certainly when you're graduating and your calendar clears up and you're planning out your new work schedule, make space for that therapist, make space for community, make space to get an assistant and you have to meet with the assistant. The assistant is going to help you, but you have to meet with them on a regular basis to communicate what needs to be done. So all you need space for all of that. And I know, particularly in nursing, we're very guilty. We will pick this 3 days, these 3 12 hours here. We're going to plug in a PRN 3 times in 6 weeks here. We do adjunct faculty here. We pick up here whenever they call us, and over here we can join whenever we need to. And so our schedule is packed, because we can do it. One of you mentioned, and we've recorded 2 episodes today, that we have, that doesn't mean we should.
Yeah.
And there's a phase where you do it because you have to, but then there should be a phase where you do it because you don't need to.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Like that.
and we have to create that space for each other because we keep cheering each other on. Another degree, another certification, another high paying job, another high profile position. But we have to say, hey, are you sure you want to take all that on right now?
Right.
Even
Right.
when Alicia transitioned into management director, she literally went from a Friday being on the floor to Monday. I was like,
Mhm.
Alicia,
Mhm.
there's got to be some mental transition there.
Yeah, it was
She
Thanksgiving
did, and
holiday.
she was going to have time carved out in like a couple weeks to be able to do that. But those kind of conversations, they have to take place.
They do.
Yeah. Um, how can people connect with you, Kelsey?
Yeah, so you can follow me on social media, Kelsey Wilson PLLC. Our handle will be changing soon because we have a practice name change, Gila Psychotherapy. So our handle will be changing to Gila Psychotherapy. You can also find me online, kelseywplc.com, soon to be changing to Gila Psychotherapy.
By the time this
So
airs, that will be live. Yeah. Can you
yes,
just spell out Gila for the audience?
yes, HEALA.
Any meaning behind that?
Uh,
Healing. That's our tagline. That's what we do. Ensure that women have adequate therapy, and so we are focused on healing for her.
Oh, okay. We love that. Well, thank you again, ladies, both of you, for coming and spending your day with us on the podcast and bringing a very important topic, not talked about enough, but definitely experienced heavily in our community. Remember, everyone, you can email us your questions. If you have questions for Kelsey for her next episode, let us know what you want to hear her talk about. You can email us at tmi.melanin@gmail.com. You can continue to subscribe, leave a comment before we sign off today. Like, share, at least share it with one person just one person. And we would appreciate it if you leave us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. Every time you do that with our platform, and thank you to those who have already done it, it lets the algorithm know that this information is important. So that when people just like you are looking for important information from credible resources, licensed professionals in the field, in the DMV, but also globally, that will show up higher in their search results for them. And they'll get the same information and hope and resources that you received today. We thank you all for watching. At the time of this recording, we release new videos every Sunday at noon Eastern on YouTube and LinkedIn. And we drop the audio on all your favorite podcast apps at 5 a.m. so that our night shift friends can be the first to get something and not the last. And maybe one day someone will play it during huddle and tell us about it. We thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.